Hello, welcome to Big Bang Radio Spotlights. This is a show where we talk to independent artists from all around the world all about their music and their process for making it. I'm your host, Isaac Anderson, and today I got to sit down with Philip from the band Broke Royals. Without any further ado, here's the interview. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Sure, I am from Washington, D.C. I'm in a band called Broke Royals, and we've been together for almost 6 years, 6 years in May. We met at William & Mary, which is a college in Virginia, and it's named after the King and Queen of England. And we were broke because we were about to graduate, and so Broke Royals is the name of the band.
Awesome. I've been up to William & Mary. I actually played a show there recently. It's a beautiful campus.
Nice.
You guys ever play the Meridian Coffee House?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
cool.
Long time ago. Yeah.
Meridian Coffee House is a cool place. So you all met at the college then?
Mm-hmm. We did, yeah. So Colin Cross and I started the band, and we had a few different guitarists play with us off the bat. And then a few years ago, Ben Wilson, who's a guitarist out of Richmond, Virginia, joined. And our bassist is Tymir Gore, and myself, Philip. So we're a four-piece, and we've been at it for a while now.
Heard that, man. So, what was the antithesis of you guys forming the band? Were you all just good friends that happened to play music? Did you go in with the intention, like, yeah, we're totally going to make this band thing?
Sure, yeah. We had, during school, I tried to form a bunch of bands, and it just wasn't working. So I started doing a solo thing, and Colin, the drummer, was building a recording studio, and he said, why don't you come in, record some demos, and I can use these to shop around to new clients. So it was totally not supposed to be a band. It was just supposed to be a solo project that he could use to entice new clients. And when we started working together, we realized that it was a really nice foil. He was able to add a lot to the songs that I hadn't thought of before. And he wasn't a songwriter, so that was something that I brought to the table. And it was just a good chemistry right off the bat. And so we just kept doing it, and we recorded 3 EPs that way, and we did not expect it. We thought it was just going to be a one-time, 3 or 4 songs that we laid down just as kind of a novelty, but it ended up really sparking something cool. So it was unexpected, and it's, one of those instances where when I'd given up on being in a band, that's exactly when the band started.
Heard that, man. That's kind of cool, how you guys had to bounce off creatively, like in how you kind of bounced off each other. And I mean, you all seem to be getting along very well. I mean, if anybody's ever seen you guys like a live video, you guys, like you're up there, like you're falling down. You guys are like, like looking at each other, like you're building the crowd up. You're getting them to clap. Like you guys really bounce off each other really, really well, which. Obviously, you were the lead person in this band. So do you come from a musical family, just like as your personal background?
I do, yeah. There's definitely a strong musical camaraderie. We're also just good friends. And from my personal background, my dad was a piano teacher growing up. So he used to teach all the kids in the neighborhood piano. And I was not his prize student, but I picked up a guitar and started to do that on the side as well, and being able to read a little music helped. And my grandmother was also a choir teacher, so there's a lot of musical history in my family, and nobody else really stuck with it, none of my siblings, but something that I'm that I took and I ran with. So
sick.
It's always been a part of my life, which is nice. Yeah. And I still play a little piano, mostly guitar and vocals, but I can get by with a little bit of
yeah, I mean, you play the synth on stage and stuff too, so that training is gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you've definitely utilized that. That's awesome, man. So, how old were you when you realized that you really wanted to start doing this? Like you do music full time, don't you?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is it purely from Broke Royals, or do you like play around in other bands, or?
No, I mean, I'll do some. I actually teach some music software workshops. Is another aspect of what I do. So I teach GarageBand and Logic Pro stuff to people in Washington, D.C. So because that's just a skill that I picked up, learning how to. When Colin and I started this band, being in the studio was a really big part of what we were doing. The live element didn't actually come until we'd been a band for 2 years. and so that's something that I'm also really passionate about, is just DAWs and like synthesizers and things like that. But what happened was I had a day job, and again, Colin and I didn't really expect to be a band. We were just kind of doing this thing as a studio project, and it wasn't something that we planned necessarily, but it was going well, and we were enjoying it. And then, at a certain point, my day job said, "You've taken enough time off to tour. You got to kind of make a decision." And so I took the leap, and that was probably 4 years ago or so. So 3 years ago.
Oh wow! So
yeah,
that's amazing. I always admire when musicians make that leap to go full time. It's a very scary thing, and especially like when people always do different aspects of the thing. Especially when you are supporting yourself from your own art. Like it's just a really beautiful thing, but it's a really scary thing too, because it's just so like fluctuating, and you kind of like you are the source of like everything that you're getting. So I mean, it's really awesome that you can do that, and you definitely deserve it. It sounds like you definitely put in the work, and you guys are definitely on the rise. So
oh, thank you.
So if you weren't, like you mentioned, you did have a day job. So if you weren't doing music, what exactly would you be doing? Do you have an option, like option B, or is it just all music?
Well, it's funny that you mention it. Like these days, when you are an independent musician, it's a lot about, or one thing that we found to be very successful is just a lot of different revenue streams. So I've done web design, I've done a lot of graphic design, something creative, maybe visual. I'm not a great artist by hand, but with a computer, with Photoshop, with Adobe Illustrator, I can get by. So maybe something in the world of web design or graphic design would take over. But you pick up odd jobs here and there, and when you're in a band, you also want to help out other friends in bands, and so all that kind of stuff, just helps you pick up little tools along the way, kind of jack of all trades. So
yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, even with the Adobe Illustrator and all that kind of stuff, it's still art, it's still another way.
Yeah.
I always find that artists, especially the musical artists, always veer more towards like different forms of art. It's always kind of interesting. So
yep.
Obviously you write your own music. What is your creative process like? Do you like writing with the other guys in the band? Do you kind of go in a corner and write like in a dark room and say, "I've emerged with art"? How exactly does that work?
It's evolved over the years. It used to be Colin. I would bring something to Colin, and we would flesh it out in the studio, and then just record it and build it up in the studio. Now, because we've got such a robust live element, I bring a sketch to the band, and then the band helps fill in the cracks, and then there's sort of a really cool organic process that happens when you're playing something live, especially when you're playing something live in front of people, where you'll find a little pocket where this would be a great place for a solo, or this would be a great place for the music to cut out entirely and then come back. And so we try to test all that stuff on the road before we go into the studio, and that's the process we're in right now, is fleshing everything out for a little bit of live performance before we lay it down, because you never know how it's going to breathe on stage until you give it a try. And so that's kind of where the process is. It starts with me, everybody inputs a little bit, and then even after you recorded it, you generally find things that like, oh, could have put a little guitar lick here, or this, that, or the other. So it's always kind of a living process.
Heard that, man. Heard that. Yeah. And obviously, like I said before, you guys really bounce off each other really, really well. Regardless of how you guys write it, it always comes out in a really beautiful and awesome way.
Thank you.
So, you guys are playing quite a lot of shows all around. Obviously, you've headlined in quite a lot of shows. But if you guys could open up for any artist, like kind of current or maybe not around anymore, who would you open up for?
Great question. Number one of all time would be Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. That would be a dream. We actually spent some of our early years doing Bruce Springsteen cover nights. So we did shows up and down the East Coast where we were a Springsteen cover band for a little bit. But Springsteen would be the dream. The Killers are a more slightly more modern band that we love. Also Bleachers, they're Jack Antonoff's group. He's a producer and a songwriter, and he's kind of right in the middle of everything that's happening with alternative rock right now. So
we talked a little bit about the inception of the band, kind of the shows you played, your creative process. But if you could play anywhere in the world, like I know you guys are based in Virginia right now, but like if you could play anywhere else in the world, where would it be?
Oh, I'd love to play in Berlin. I lived in Berlin for a little while, and I was actually my family's military, so I was born in Germany, and so that'd be kind of a fun homecoming for me.
Heard that, man.
Yeah.
Is there like an actual like music scene in Berlin? I wonder like how the music scenes go over there. Do you know?
Oh yeah, there's a huge music scene. DJ culture there is enormous, but when I lived there, I saw TV on the radio and some other bands. There's an area called Kreuzberg, which is a little bit like Brooklyn, and it's their sort of hipster, music scene, DIY area. So
heard that.
There's a lot going on. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm always fascinated, because I'm a musician myself, and I'm in North Carolina, and North Carolina has a very vibrant music scene. But when you look elsewhere, because I've seen people that have contacted me from other regions, I'm lucky enough to be able to talk to artists from all around the world about how their music scenes are, and they're just much different. Like the culture is much different, but I never knew that like certain places had such a vibrant music scene. Like Brazil was like massive. Like I didn't understand how massive like alternative rock was in Brazil.
Totally.
I mean, it's really cool. So obviously we're kind of in the new music industry as modern musicians. And you utilize the internet quite a lot. I was browsing your social medias to do a little research on you guys, and it looks like you guys stay very active on it, and it's really nice. I love the way it's set up, and it looks like you have a really good concept of like branding and how to kind of market your music and everything. How do you feel like the internet has impacted your career?
Yeah, I'm glad that it looks good. It's always nice to hear how it sounds or how it all comes across to someone who's looking at it with fresh eyes. I spend a lot of time doing graphic design, spend a lot of time working with other people who can help us with graphic design. I'm working with some illustrators now because we wanted to kind of give our album a new, like an image refresh because it's been out for 6 months. So we got someone to do some illustrations for us from the cover art. So, all that to just say, like, it's just a big part of what we think about, because even if you're not playing shows, you can still be promoting things, but you can't post the same picture 10 times. You can't post the same link without any variation. So it does take a lot of, premeditated planning, and it's definitely not the sexiest part of being in a rock band, but it is a way to connect with your fans on a consistent basis. And one of the things that we've tried to do recently is have a little bit more fun with it. And so we did like an old 90s infomercial spoof for our vinyl promo. Did a little like voiceover and made it look real grainy, and tried to just do a little homage to something you might have seen on MTV at 1 a.m. in 1996 or something like that. You know what I mean? Just
I
have a
can
little
picture
fun
that
with
so
it.
well in my head.
Yeah, so we just want to kind of do things that are original, and just because we're a band, music's not the only thing that we're creating. We try to be a whole like identity, a whole brand, which is a little cringeworthy to say, but when you start to embrace it, it can be fun, and you can reinvent yourself. And so it's definitely a big part of the process. And my only advice is just collect as much as you can. Like always, we have a guy who goes on tour with us, and he collects video and photos, and he's a great videographer, great photographer. He helps us sell merch also, and so it just kind of like having him has allowed us to always have footage that we can post, because Instagram, Facebook, they're insatiable beasts. They want more, always want more. So.
Well, we only got a couple more questions, so I wanted to ask you. This is probably one of the biggest ones, probably one of the biggest concept ones I'm going to ask you. How do you want Broke Royals to be remembered? Maybe like a decade from now. You know, like how do you, when I say the word, oh, remember them Broke Royals, or you know, Broke Royals is going on tour? What do you want people to think?
Well, I hope we're still around. That would be my first thing. We have a running joke in the band that there's no reason to break up. Just take a hiatus. Bands in especially local music scenes tend to get very worked up, you know, maybe about some internal dispute or something, and then they break up, and then 6 months later they realize they could have just taken a break. I hope we're still around, and I hope we're still all friends, and I hope that we're just out there making music. And I think for me, you know, I one of my favorite bands is Wilco. I found Wilco when I was like 12. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot was on some Rolling Stone article that it was laying around my house, and they've been a band that I've grown with over the years, and their music has changed and evolved, and I feel a real kinship, a real relationship to that, because the way it spoke to me when I was younger is different than how it speaks to me now. It's like, you know, rereading a great book or something. It's going to touch on different things at different points in your life. And so I hope that in 10 years we're still around, and we've built an even bigger fan base of people who have grown with us, and maybe the stuff that we released last year is speaking to them, but in a different way when they're, you know, when it's the year 2030, if the Earth is still around.
Well, thank you so much for being with me, Philip. Where can people find more about Broke Royals? Where can people find your tour schedule and all that, social media?
Sure, BrokeRoyals.com, and we'll be, you know, releasing more dates very soon. But we've got all of our stuff at BrokeRoyals.com, or if you go to any social media, we're at Broke Royals, or username Broke Royals, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. So we like to keep it simple. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very nice, very nice. I think it's very easy to remember. Philip, before we go, this isn't one of the listed questions, but it's just one I like to ask all my guests before I go. So I'm a big movie fan. I believe that's just another form of art that, just like music, that I'm very passionate about. I've worked in, you know, doing different short films, and I do a movie show here every single week. And I ask all my musician guests before they go, what is your favorite movie?
What is my favorite movie? Oh, gosh.
This is one that people struggle with quite a lot.
That's tough, man. Oh, wow. My favorite movie. I'm responding like I've never been asked that question before, but I don't know the last time I had to answer it. Certainly when I was younger, it was The Life Aquatic. That was the first Wes Anderson movie I ever saw. I thought it was the funniest, just most brilliant thing ever. These days, you know,
if you stuck with Life Aquatic, I'd be happy, because that's a fantastic one.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's a great one. I recently rewatched it, and it holds up. It still makes me laugh, and I think that was my introduction to Bill Murray's sensibility. You know, when I was like 15, I don't know that I'd seen anything else, maybe Ghostbusters, and then that Willem Dafoe as the sort of cranky assistant is like still one of my favorite roles of all time. So I'll stick with that. Life Aquatic, why not?
Thanks to Philip from Broke Royals for sitting down with me and talking all about his music. If you guys want to see more interviews just like this, you can go to facebook.com/Studio67NCC, youtube.com/NashCom College, or you can find us on Instagram at Studio67NCC. Thank you all for watching. I'm Isaac Anderson, and until next time, stay lovely.